Saturday on 1 and at 10 to 6, romance is in the air with the Flying Doctors. Then...
If you were born to the sign of opportunity, Les Dawson will be in your house in conjunction with 7 acts new to television. Goldfish is dead.
In 3 Up, 2 Down, Sam turns super sleuth as he tries to discover what Daphne is up to.
Let me out of here!
But investigations fall flat for Private Detective Paul in The Case of the Lost Love, the Perry Mason film at 7:55. At 9:50, a family feud in Casualty.
I want you to see him, Dad.
No.
Yes. Just once, before he dies, I want all 3 of us to be together.
The Road reaches Wembley at 10:40 and features highlights from the match of the day, the 1990 FA Cup final.
Paramount City, a smile, a song, a couple of bouncers, a maraschino cherry, a fish supper for 2, and I hope you.
At 20 past midnight, the late film is a tense psychological thriller. Intrigue and deception in Double Deal.
What do you want?
All I want is a cup of coffee and some chicken.
Saturday Variety on 1.
Now on BBC One, the latest news at 5:35 with Laurie Mayer.
The headlines this evening. The Prime Minister says the battle against inflation remains at the top of the government's priorities. She tells the Scottish Tories that Labour's plans for the economy are like putting out a fire with petrol. A teenage girl dies of meningitis at a holiday centre in the West Country. And the cup final ends in a draw. Crystal Palace and Manchester United are to meet again on Thursday. The Prime Minister has attacked Labour for what she calls its class warfare and said that its plans for the economy would bring the long, dark shadow of rampant inflation. Mrs Thatcher told the Scottish Conservative Conference that, by contrast, the government's top priority was to battle to keep inflation down.
Despite losses in the local elections and inflation at 9.4% and rising, Mrs Thatcher claimed a Tory recovery had started that would lead to a 4th general election victory. That optimism, her opponents call it wishful thinking, is based on the view that things might have been very much worse and a belief that the personal challenge from Michael Heseltine is fading. She said there'd been no let-up in the government's radical policies.
They revived our country's fortunes, and we shall take them further forward. There's a lot more to do. A woman's work is never done.
Her most immediate task is to make changes to the poll tax. There were, she said, problems.
And we shall deal with them. But our aim won't be to protect high-spending socialist councils. It will be to give some protection to those who have to pay for them.
On inflation, she offered the familiar formula of high interest rates to cut consumer borrowing and turn the attack on what she said were Labour's proposals.
Their latest is to urge more public borrowing, higher spending and lower interest rates. But that's like trying to put out a fire with a petrol pump.
Labour was just trying to breathe life into the corpse of socialism while it was being buried elsewhere.
As socialism goes down all over Europe, so it will be in Britain. And tomorrow, as today, will be ours.
That kind of fighting talk helps lift morale among party activists, but doesn't in itself offer evidence of a Tory revival. This afternoon, though, the Prime Minister demonstrated her unchanged priorities. Avoiding the Scottish Cup final, she was piped aboard a nuclear submarine in the Firth of Clyde. Don't drop the pilot, said Kenneth Baker yesterday. There are calmer waters ahead. But there are others who believe the captain may still be going down with a sinking ship.
Labour's industry spokesman, Gordon Brown, said that no amount of hectoring by the Prime Minister would disguise the fact that Britain was now the inflation capital of Europe. Both Butlins and health experts say there's no risk to holidaymakers following the death of a 16-year-old girl from meningitis. She'd been staying at the Butlins Centre at Minehead in Somerset. A 7-month-old boy who was staying at the same camp also contracted the disease. He is said to be recovering.
The baby and the teenager who contracted the rare meningococcal strain of meningitis had been staying at opposite ends of the huge holiday camp. Today, as 6,000 new arrivals checked in, each was given a letter outlining the facts about the disease, which has long been centred on the West Country. Staff from the Meningitis Trust have set up an office on site and have dealt with hundreds of concerned phone calls. Is there no danger here at all, then?
You couldn't say that. You couldn't say that about anywhere in the United Kingdom. There has been an increase in cases of meningitis throughout England and Wales, so we couldn't guarantee that. But there's no more danger here than anywhere else.
Butlins won't know how many cancellations there have been until later tonight. But those staying on said they weren't concerned enough to leave.
Well, you're there, and you're on holiday, so you might as well just, take it,
It did cross our minds before we went into the leisure park, yes.
Somerset Health Authority have launched a full-scale investigation into the incidence of meningitis, but haven't yet established any link between the two cases.
The three main opposition parties in Romania are to have emergency talks on Monday about violence and intimidation in the run-up to next weekend's elections. They blame the ruling Salvation Front, which includes many former communist politicians.
At the Parliament building today, Mr Iliescu was to have held a meeting with the groups who have been demonstrating in the streets. He didn't meet them, but the press instead. And as usual, he blamed the demonstrators for not showing up. He said that they were electioneering, wasting time and divided among themselves. More to the point, the demonstrations would not be allowed to continue after the elections. The protest is now 3 weeks old and its leaders believe Mr Iliescu will have to talk to them. There's no sign of that yet, or that he's seriously concerned about the intimidation of his rival candidates who've been jostled and harassed, especially in Moldavia, in the north and east of the country. I asked him if he thought the conditions were right for a fair and free election. He said, I think that compared to some countries, they're rather mild. The other parties don't agree, including the Liberals, who today held their main rally. They now have to decide whether to stay in a losing race. Martin Bell, BBC News, Bucharest.
The body of Cardinal Tommaso Fi, the Roman Catholic primate of all Ireland, is nearing the end of its journey back to Armagh. The Cardinal died during a pilgrimage to Lourdes.
The specially chartered jet carrying the remains of the Irish Roman Catholic primate arrived at Dublin Airport at lunchtime. Prime Minister Charles Haughey and Dr. Patrick Hillery, the country's president, were among the hundreds of people waiting to say farewell to the man who had led Ireland's 3.7 million Catholics. The Archbishop of Dublin, Dr. Desmond Connell, received the coffin at the airport church.
In the waters of baptism, Cardinal Tommaso Fi died with Christ and rose with him to new life.
After a short service, the cortege was later to leave for the journey north to the city of Armagh, where the Cardinal's body will lie in state at St Patrick's Cathedral.
The FA Cup final at Wembley has ended in a draw and will have to be replayed on Thursday. As many of you will have just seen, Crystal Palace and Manchester United drew 3-3 after extra time.
Crystal Palace, the underdogs in terms of...
The Scottish Cup final between Aberdeen and Celtic ended in a 0-0 draw at Hampden Park. For the first time, the match was decided on penalties, with Aberdeen winning the shootout 9-8. Falklands hero Simon Weston faced one of his most nervous moments today, his wedding. Simon married Lucy Titherington exactly 8 years to the day after he sailed from Southampton to join the South Atlantic Task Force. The former Welsh Guardsman was horribly burned after the Sir Galahad troopship was bombed. The ceremony was at the London Chapel of the Welsh Guards. And that's all for now. The main news on BBC One this evening is at 9:30.
Hello. Apart from 1 or 2 showers in the east and 1 or 2 in the southwest later tomorrow, it's mostly a dry story for the next 24 hours. This was a satellite picture taken earlier, a great stream of cloud through much of the eastern and central half of the country, though there were some breaks in the far east. In the west here, the best of the sunshine, though some persistent cloud over parts of Northern Ireland. Things changing very little, so that's how we see it this evening, just a risk of 1 or 2 showers in the east. Overnight, still 1 or 2 showers in the east, perhaps even the odd heavy one coming into East Anglia. In the west, clear spells leading to 1 or 2 mist and fog patches, and perhaps even a touch of frost on the ground as the temperatures dip to around 4 degrees Celsius or a little less. In the east, they should sit around about 7 or 8. There's tomorrow's weather chart. This little area of low pressure still uncomfortably close, but the next system pushing in from the southwest. So it's still basically an east-west split, still quite cloudy along the east, still some outbreaks of rain, 1 or 2 showers, the best of the sunshine in the west. During the day, we'll find 1 or 2 showers coming into the southwest, mostly into southern Ireland, while many of these eastern areas begin to brighten up. The top temperature tomorrow, probably in West Wales, around 20 degrees Celsius. That's it from me. Good evening to you.
This is BBC One Southwest.
Good evening. 1,000 tonnes of crude oil is heading towards West Country beaches after a collision off the South Devon coast. A 250,000-tonne oil tanker, the Rose Bay, collided with a Brixham trawler 14 miles off Start Point. A tank was damaged and crude oil has been pouring into the sea. Aircraft from the Marine Pollution Unit are now at the scene to monitor the extent of the pollution. All maritime districts are on major alert. The collision happened at about 3 o'clock. It's understood nobody was hurt. Police are investigating the cause of a fire at a North Devon factory last night, which caused £150,000 worth of damage. The blaze broke out at AK Precision Mouldings on the Aviemore Industrial Estate in Barnstable at about 11 o'clock last night. 40 firemen tackled the blaze after the alarm was raised by a neighbour. The fire, which police are treating as suspicious, began in the packing store. Plastic granules and packing were destroyed in the blaze, and families were warned to keep their windows shut as a precaution against the fumes. 30 detectives and uniformed officers have been stepping up the hunt for a rapist who attacked a woman at knife point in Bideford yesterday. The woman was assaulted as she was out jogging in Ethelwyn Close yesterday morning. Police are now carrying out house-to-house inquiries in an effort to trace witnesses. The man is described as about 25, around 5 feet 6 tall, with brown eyes, wearing a khaki T-shirt and trousers. A woman was attacked during a robbery on a Plymouth petrol station last night. 2 men, one wearing a balaclava and the other with a bin liner on his head, went into the Milehouse filling station on Wolsey Road in the early hours of this morning. One grabbed the 22-year-old female assistant by the throat, demanding cash, and the other used a large stick to smash the security camera. They escaped with a small amount of cash from the till. The woman was unhurt. There's been fierce criticism in Cornwall following the government's decision to fund an air ambulance in Scotland. Cornwall's air ambulance costs around £360,000 a year and has been funded by public donations for the last 3 years. Health Minister Roger Freeman recently said he couldn't provide money for Cornwall as this would set a precedent. But the General Manager of the Duchy's Health Service, Ron Spencer, says the government is now morally obliged to fund the service. A fisherman has died in an accident on a trawler fishing off the Lizard. 30-year-old Paul Card from Newhaven broke his neck when he was trapped in dredging equipment on board the Seafalk. A second member of the crew suffered minor injuries. The boat has docked at Falmouth while an inquiry is conducted into the incident. Cricket, and Somerset star opening batsman South African Jimmy Cook has hit yet another century for the county. At Hove against Sussex in the Benson and Hedges Cup, he scored 177 in as many minutes to help Somerset reach 321 for 5 in 55 overs. With county skipper Peter Roebuck, who scored 91 before he was bowled by Ralph Piggott, this pair put on 131 for the second wicket. Sussex started badly, losing the first 4 wickets for 41 in 12 overs, and the latest score we have is 81 for 4 after 25 overs. Well, now I hand over to Craig for the weather.
Thanks very much, Tony. Well, we've got generally low pressure over the region at the moment, and indeed a generally slack airflow. So this evening we're going to keep the sunshine, albeit rather hazy sunshine. And then as we go through the night, we'll find, in fact, some valley mist and fog patches coming along, some fog on the western coast there, and some mist in the Channel Islands as well. Now, as we go along with these sort of breaks in the cloud, it could well mean that temperatures could get down to 5 degrees Celsius in well-sheltered places inland, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Just the outside chance of a touch of ground frost in those well-sheltered places, so watch out for your bedding plants there. The winds generally from the east or southeast, force 3 to 4. The visibility moderate or good, except where we get those mist and fog patches. So on to tomorrow then, and we start off with the mist and fog being a little bit slow to clear, but indeed it will do inland. But unfortunately we will keep some fog patches around those western coasts and some mist in the Channel Islands, but some sunshine as well. And then as we get into the afternoon, becoming rather more cloudy, I'm afraid. Indeed, we could just see a little bit of rain in the far west late on in the day, and indeed perhaps a thundery outbreak in the Channel Islands. It won't spoil things at Taunton, though, where Somerset are taking on Hampshire in that Sunday league game, or indeed down there at Newquay, where it's the start of Cornwall County Golf Week. Golf Week, so it goes on all the week, obviously. Just up the coast at Stratton, they've got the Commemoration Day celebrations continuing. As far as the maximum temperatures are concerned, up to anything between 15 and 19 degrees Celsius. There is a wave on the north coast. As far as the surf's concerned, it's clean, it's flat on the south coast. The winds east to southeast, force 3 to 4, the visibility good. And as far as the outlook's concerned for Monday and Tuesday, a few showers, but mainly dry with some sunny intervals. Tony.
Thanks very much, Craig. The Craig Rich weather forecast now available 6 evenings a week. We'll be back on Monday. Good night. Good night.
This is BBC One. Now it's time for Australia's medics to take to the skies for today's adventure with the Flying Doctors.